On today's episode, cookbooks. Were they always what we usually see them as? Nope. They actually were much, much different. Mom's here. Let's talk. Good morning. At least good morning from here. Good morning to you. And good evening, good afternoon to whoever's watching, wherever they're watching. This is Books, Banter and Beyond. And today we're talking about probably one of the most obvious type of books that most people have. But I learned they're not actually what they originally started as. We're talking cookbooks and how they became the book that we're used to today. So, first and foremost, they were more practical manuals over anything else. The earliest known book dates back to ancient civilizations, not the typical home kitchen that we're used to. And one of the earliest surviving collections is actually from ancient Mesopotamia, circa around 1700 BCE, written on clay tablets. Now, instead of these being full-on recipes like for, a burger or meat or whatever, these were actually focused on simple things like stew and broth, but not just for everybody. These were specifically made for the elite, so the leaders and the rulers of whoever it was. The assumption here, from what I read, was that these were more made for people of higher ranking.
Interesting. So not like everyday cooks.
So I think from what historians were saying, or are saying, I should say, is that the everyday cook, they kind of had their own things they were making anyway. There wasn't necessarily a recipe. It was, this is what you ate, so this is what you made. If
That's
that's kind of what they were saying.
that's kind of
In ancient,
yeah.
yeah, in ancient Rome, we have the Apicius de Recognitionaria. I'm probably
Easy for
baffled
you
that
to say. Yeah,
horribly.
yeah, easy for you to say.
It became one of the first compiled recipe collections. So we're still not even at books yet. We're still just at collecting. The Encyclopedia Britannica describes it as the practical guide, again, tied to wealth and status, not the everyday cook. So, we can see right now recipes and cookbooks were not made for just the general anybody. They were specifically written for people in the
The
upper
elite.
ranks.
Yeah, the elite.
Right. And then early cookbooks were written for professionals after that, from royalty to professionals, assuming those people had the time and the ability to do those recipes. So recipes were very labor intensive. They weren't always the simple put something in a pan, give it 30 minutes, and then you're done like we have, today.
Right.
So you've already, throughout the thing, we're just surprised at the fact that this was not a normal thing. Is that shocker to you from what you know personally, or is it just
Yeah,
kind of
well,
generally?
yeah, from what I know personally, because I did, I wasn't alive during the Roman era. But from my own personal experience, I mean, that's kind of curious because as far as I've been, for as long as I've been alive, there've been cookbooks, and you open the cookbooks, and it's different people that do the cookbooks, and even though we also had family recipes that we handed down without cookbooks, so I'm curious where that falls. Where you have your grandmother and your great grandmothers who hand wrote down the recipes, right?
So we're actually jumping in that next because
Oh,
once we get to medieval Europe, that is when we started getting recipes circulated through notes and manuscripts,
got it.
usually between households, but also between neighbors as well. Because if you think about it, everybody was built within each other, so the community was there. So if somebody had a great recipe for bread or for meat or
Right.
for soup, you usually would share it with others. With the invention of the printing press that we've talked about before, that's when you started getting more mass produced. Because with the printing press, you were able to then copy and recopy multiple pages
Right.
at a quicker level, meaning more people got it. In 1747, we had Hannah Glass's The Art of Cookery made plain and easy, which kind of marked the turning point of specifically to royalty into anybody who can get a hold of it can now get a recipe.
Got it.
According to food historians, this specific book is basically what shifted. So, to answer your question of where we started getting cookbooks, this book is what shifted from specification of the person to anybody who, and I mean, you also got to think you had to have the money for it as well. So, if you weren't necessarily well off, you may still have not gotten the cookbook because you had to be
Right.
able to afford it from.
Right.
By the 19th century, cookbooks had increasingly included measurements, the specific times, and specific instructions. So if you ever look at a recipe today and it says, if you want to make bread, you need to do X, Y, and Z,
Right.
19th century is where you had those standardized.
So it feels like at this point the cookbooks became accessible to everyday folk at that point.
More or less. I mean, you still had to be able to afford them, but I would think that by now you at least had the ability that if somebody you knew in the community had a cookbook, you could probably go to them and say, "Hey, I heard you have a recipe for, stew. Could you pass it to me for me to try it at home as well?" So
Right.
you could probably get it a little easier. Um, and then I'm going to throw the question to you: is it clarity that works, or is it accessibility that makes the recipes easier? Do you think?
I think clarity. I think, the fact that in the 19th century they actually started, including what the measurements were for each of the ingredients. Even though, again, going back to, getting recipes from our grandparents and our a pinch of this,
Mhm.
a pinch of that, they didn't measure. The fact that at this point in according to the information that you've, dived into, it says by the 19th century, it looks like it was a reproducible, meaning that it had the same, you knew how many ingredients, you knew how much of each ingredient, and everyone could do the same thing, which in fact then made it teachable, right? Then you could have a cooking teacher that could come and say, here, make this, and here's the ingredients, here are the measurements.
Right, and then you jump to the 20th century and you have books like The Joy of Cooking, which I know is actually one of the most famous,
I have it.
uh, series out there.
Yeah.
This is where you started getting more skill-based work and
Right.
more traditional-based work. The Smithsonian and other food historians note that cookbooks like this are what keeps everything basically alive, whether it's an immigrant tradition, whether it's a
Right.
regional cuisine, and also the history too, because not a lot of people think about it. But if you watch a show about food, you're not just eating the food, but you're eating basically history. I don't know if you ever heard of Andrew Zimmern. He's the guy who eats the bizarre foods.
Yeah.
He not only teaches you about the food, but he actually talks about the reason behind it, why they eat the foods they do, how they came to start eating the
Right.
food. So
Right.
these cookbooks are not just necessarily for a simple recipe to eat, but they're also, you could call it, I guess, a memoir of the
Yeah.
society at large.
I think what you're saying is so true. I mean, I don't cook a lot, but I do collect cookbooks that are beautiful, that have beautiful photographs, that have things that maybe if I had time I might cook or not, but they almost become coffee table books because some of these with the illustrate, they're absolutely
Well, I
gorgeous.
was gonna ask you then, because is there a reason you think people collect all these books when you can easily get these recipes elsewhere? And I think you answered the question, it's the visual,
The
it's
visual,
the
and
color,
there's something about opening up that cookbook in your kitchen, whether it's on a stand or it's on the table, that it's all smushed with, the food that got stained. There's something, again, you know how I feel about used books. It's the same thing. You know that there's
Mhm,
a history, how many times I've made that recipe or this recipe. But to your point, a lot of us, me included, collect recipes online. We'll see something that looks really good, we'll do a
mhm.
screenshot or we'll go search for it, and then we have to figure out how we're supposed to make this when the phone turns off, right? When the phone turns off, because it goes black. So I think cookbooks are going to be here forever. um,
Mhm.
Historically speaking, I think that they speak to the time that they were made, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does, and they are very hard to find. I mean, I know right now we don't have, many in, or we don't have any right now in the store, but when you do come across them, I always recommend grab them because even if you're not going to necessarily make the recipe, it's the history behind it that I think is the most important part. And if anything, you can then give it to somebody else and go, hey, you want something really cool to look at? Check out this cookbook from the
Agreed.
40s, the 50s, whatever it is. So yeah, I
Betty
love them. I think
Crocker. There was the Betty Crocker cookbook, and that was
that's another, yeah,
and cookies and all, and that was very. And I didn't have that one, but I definitely have the Joy of Cooking. I think it's
yes.
just a rite of passage. At least when I was growing up, it was a rite of passage. You had to get the Joy of Cooking. I mean, that was like, and it's got torn cover and the whole thing. I mean, it's a great. Do you like to cook?
I mean, I don't do it often. I do enjoy checking out recipes to see how they work,
Yeah,
and once in a while, I do get kind of a smile because I go, that looks kind of fun. And it's not so much the fun from necessarily eating it, but from the
creating,
creation of it, the
creating.
art of making food. So I enjoy when I see somebody making an old time baked good or a new age salad or something, not because of the ingredients, but because they are enjoying the creation. And it makes me smile seeing
Right.
somebody
Do
make
you
a
so the question has to be asked because I grew up in the world of cookbooks. There was no such thing as getting your recipes online back then.
right.
Do you have cookbooks?
I don't know if we do right now. I think I may have had some prior, but I don't think we
So it's
have.
generational?
Probably. I mean, I remember, yeah, because I remember when I needed to look something up, I used the old internet and I would go to something like Food Network or
Right,
something like joyofcooking.com or whatever, and I would grab the recipe, print it out, or write it down on a piece of paper. And
right,
that's what you did. So, in a weird way, you continued the cookbook, even if you had to rewrite it down somewhere else.
right.
You know,
Yeah,
it
different
is what it
different
is, I guess.
times,
But
different times. I don't know if you have cookbooks in the store, do
not
you?
at the moment, but I'm definitely looking for some because I think it is definitely a niche, market that people would want.
Absolutely. So go check it out, guys. Nextchapterbookstore.shop. All sorts of books, not cookbooks, but according to Rob, there will be cookbooks in there.
That
Check it
is the
out.
hope.
Find something that's fun for you. Again, we all know how much I love used books. You've got a great selection in there. Go find something that you like. Always fun to do these shows with you, Rob. Any last thoughts?
I'm hungry.
Okay, well, that's a
That is
good
my
time.
last thought.
Okay, go eat. See everyone next time. Bye.